Of course, this is on the same spot that Blue Ridge is, I think, today. But there's the very first picture I know of Blue Ridge. All this stuff is at Guilford College. That's why I mention it. The Quakers are the ones who come up here and start this school. And David Sampson is the leader of that group. And that's all about 1888, 1889, which is, of course, the same year on January 19th, 1889, that Bob Childress was born. I guess he was born, I think he was born down on Boyd Hollow, where the Hasten House, is that how you pronounce his name? Hasten House is today. And of course their cemetery is right there. So Bob Childress and Blue Ridge School kind of grew up together, I guess you could say, in a funny sort of way. This is, like I said, off Boyd Hollow over here. I went out there to take this picture. The sky was just glorious that day, and I was very concerned I was going to run into some snakes. I didn't see a single snake until I went down to Bertie and Theodore's house. Ann has bought it. I went in the house to try to check on it for her, as I do every couple of weeks, and I came face to face with a 4-foot black snake. I sent Ann a message and told her she had a render. And here's some pictures from Blue Ridge. Most all these pictures I got from Bobby Clement, who I think got them from Carrie Sue Cullen. Who knows where Carrie Sue got them? She might have took them, who knows? But these are all pictures of Blue Ridge a little later. But they had dorms, they had a school, they had a church. I'm not going to get into all the details about that. But they eventually, of course, are going to, the Quakers are going to sell it to the Presbyterians, and I think then the Presbyterians sell it to the Catholics. And a couple more pictures. Let's see. You seen all these, Shelby? Have you seen all of them?
Not all.
Most all of these either got from Bobby or Guilford College. Guilford College has a huge collection of Blue Ridge School stuff that you can go and read through if you're interested in that sort of thing. The thing you read about in The Man Who Moved the Mountain is a couple things. One is Bob Childress talks about the first time he ever had a drink of alcohol. I think he's 3 years old. His mother, I think, gave it to him on the rag. And, you know, Arab is a little different place then. And it's much more violent. Well, maybe it's much more violent, I don't know. But a lot of alcohol. That's the Hatfields and McCoys up there in the top left. There's a lot of violence. A lot of people get killed here. The Quakers come in here to try to change that, and they have a time. They really have a time. One of the hobbies that Bob Childress writes about in The Man Who Moved the Mountain is this thing they called rocking, where I guess your hobby was you threw rocks at buildings and or people. So Ernest T. Bass was real. And Otis there, Otis was pretty much real in Ararat, which in September, Danny will talk all about all of this. But, you know, I never realized until, I guess, this week that throwing rocks at people and buildings was a real thing. And they really did that. That was something that Bob Childress writes about doing. This is my favorite picture.
Oh, look at that. Right.
So
Yeah.
here we go. The back row is an interesting crowd, isn't it? You got the ladies in the front. So from far right, you got Davis Reed Smith and Marion. And then you got Harry Epperson there in the middle. You got George Gwynn, Theodore and Gray's daddy. And little old Bob Childress, who was a big man, looks awful small compared to this bunch of hooligans, doesn't he? I was just thinking, I knew 3 of these guys. I actually knew them in my life. Harry, George, and Davis. Davis, of course, would be Fred and Reed's father. So that came from Bobby Clement, and I wanted to share that with you because that's one of my favorite pictures of all the ones I've ever found. But Harry looks like he's ready to go start a radio station, I guess. George delivered the mail, and Bob, of course, became the Man Who Moved the Mountain. And Davis Reed Smith over there is, like I said, Fred and Reed's, and Joey's, and Colt's. And, you know, it goes on. I think I'm on number 4 or 5 Davis Smiths in my life. 4 or 5. So how many of y'all related to people in this picture?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man. But anyway, I wanted to share that with you because that's, I just love that picture. That's an AAT Mafia meeting if I ever saw one right there. Bob is going to meet and marry Pearl Ayers in 1912. I think that's Pearl on the front left there in this picture. I don't know exactly who everybody else in this picture is, but I'm pretty sure that's Pearl. They, of course, will have 2 children together, a son and a daughter. Pearl will die in 1918, and she's buried there in the Childress Cemetery off of Boyd Hollow Road. Beside Haston, who is Bob's brother, Bob's older brother, who probably is as influential on Bob Childress as any man alive, getting him and supporting him and all that, other than maybe we're talking about Roy Smith. Shelby brought a couple of books up here. One's about Roy Smith, who was really instrumental in getting Bob going, and a book about Bluemont. So if you're interested over there. So Shelby, correct me if I'm wrong. Roy's son was Newton.
Newt was Roy's father.
Roy's father.
When the Presbyterians took over Blue Ridge School, Newt was sent from South Carolina
Okay.
to be the minister. And he had several sons, Roy being one of them. And they ended up founding most of the Presbyterian churches in this area, Unity, Mary Walker, Danube. But Roy was the minister at Bluemont when you make me, I'll be quiet.
No, I like for you to come so I don't mess it up. So Clarabelle was
Roy's sister.
Roy's sister.
And Ayla did.
Newt was
And
the
Ayla
mother.
Well, they used to babysit me when I was a kid. Clarabelle and Ayla used to babysit me because Mom and Daddy, after they lived here, they moved down here right in front of the store. And I guess Clarabelle and them lived next door. So they babysat me when I was a little boy.
And our grandmother lived next in the house at the other apartment.
Yeah. So I wish I had the forethought to talk to Clarabelle and Ayla.
We did.
About all that then. But it's funny what a small world it is sometimes. That they actually had babysat me as a little boy. Bob also, from the oral tradition that I know, lived over near where Harry Epperson's house is today, up there on Fitzpost Road. And if you look down towards Squirrel Spur from there, Bob, from the oral tradition that had his blacksmith shop in that area. Well, the other thing that came through that area about the same time was the Dinky Railroad. So Bob's blacksmith shop, I'm pretty sure, was right along the Dinky Railroad in that area in Eastern, which we've done programs about here. But like I said, he lived over there pretty close to where I think Harry Epperson's house is today. And the thing that I was going to talk about, and this is just a theory of mine, if you know where I'm talking about, or as I like to say, the end of Bobby Clemens' driveway, that's where I think Bob's blacksmith shop might have been. Clark's Creek Progressive Church is right there. And I've often wondered if Bob Childress wasn't sitting there doing blacksmith work and would hear the choir, or they had a rush arbor, whatever they did, if he heard them sing out there while he was blacksmithing. Because as you know, later on, Bob would take the unusual stance of inviting them to come to his white churches to sing. And one of the young people who was there was Fred Brent. Fred was there in that church and told me, he remembered Bob Childress very well and he invited them to come. And so, I can't prove that, but I think it's very possible that that's where Bob maybe got the idea to invite them to come to his churches. Of course, we all know that, I guess, at Beasley's store when we were all kids at the crossroads. And right across there from where our good friend, the great Greg Radford, grew up. But anyway, Fred was always an interesting guy to me because he couldn't go to Blue Ridge. He ended up being the principal of Blue Ridge. In 1912, of course, the shootout at Hillsville happens. And this really kind of changes Bob Childress' life. I think he started to realize a lot about the violence. And I always love his quote about it. He said, "I was hardly ever sober, not even in the morning. I was miserable and sick to my soul." And that's when I think he started to turn his life over to Jesus Christ. If you haven't been, they're doing remarkable work on this house. And now, Shelby, update us.
We have made remarkable progress. We have a fur piece to go still. But this week we're getting the floors refinished. Everything there just about has been replaced. It was on the ground in the back when we got it. And the first $100,000 we spent, we raised it 4 feet, put a foundation under it. We put a heating system in, cooling system, new floors, new walls, new roof, except for the gazebo still has the original slate. We just could not afford to put a slate roof back on it, so we just put a regular roof. But we're open the first weekend of each month, Saturday and Sunday, from 1 till 4 for tours. If we have guided tours to the house every first weekend, so it'll be August 5 and 6 this coming month.
And I encourage you, if you're interested, to support them in doing this, because we've waited a long time to get this house preserved. And the other thing you do if you go to take the tours is you get to see Raleigh Puck. So that's why it's funny, he is always there when I do it. But like I said, this is the thing in 1912 that changes, I think, Bob Childress' life. He goes on the posse, I think, to hunt the Allens some of them. And becomes a deputy sheriff. He keeps on blacksmithing, I think. And he's going to, of course, a few years later, lose his wife, Pearl. Maybe Kathy might know this. I don't know if it was the flu that got her or childbirth or a combination of both. But
she had the flu, but she died right after childbirth.
Okay. So we don't think about the flu in 1918 because none of us, well, hopefully none of us were here in 1918. But you know, I think there were 50 million people worldwide died of this flu. And there was almost, I think, over 500,000 in the United States who died of this flu. And it was really something. Of course, it's World War I is going on while this is happening. And like I said, Bob Childress loses his wife and finds himself a single father in the hollow. He's going to marry Mamie Leela Montgomery in 1919. This is the cabin that's down on what I guess used to be the Moyer Dilleback place. Eric owns this now? Is that what
Yes.
Eric owns this now. And this, by oral tradition, has always been a cabin that people said Bob Childress lived in at some point too. So this is the second Mrs. Childress, who lived until what, 1983, I think? She lived a long time. And Bob will have all his other children. Bob gets the calling to become a preacher in Moret, Virginia, in the 19-teens, early 20s. And he goes down to Davidson College, north of Charlotte, where he sold apples to pay for his education. He actually, before that, ended up going back to Blue Ridge. I think he went into school with his son into his first grade. Bob probably a little larger than the rest of the first grade class. But he got his education. He ends up going to Davidson. He starts, I think, about this time being a student pastor at Mayberry. So he begins his work there. But, you know, I'm sure all his in-laws and family probably thought he was insane. Here he was with 2 children, going off to Davidson College to get his degree so he could then go to school and be a preacher. 1923, he borrowed $100 from his brother, moved to Richmond, and went to the Union Theological Seminary, which is still there in Richmond. And he spent, I think, 1 year there, maybe, or a couple of years there. He got a degree, and he had all kinds of churches coming forward, wanting him to be their pastor. He had all sorts of offers, and he turned them all down, and he came back to the Buffalo. Start his ministry, and it's just amazing. He was offered things like houses, cars, and huge salaries, and he turned it all down to come to the Buffalo and start his ministry. I'm not going to go into too much detail about these churches. Some of y'all probably know more about these churches than I do. But the man who moved the mountain, of course, makes all these rock churches famous. Bob didn't necessarily build all these churches, you understand. A lot of them were already built, and he's responsible for putting the rocks. I think he got the idea from a church in Tennessee he saw or something like that, and he came back and they started rocking all these churches. So that's Bull Mountain, which was his home base. He started a school there. He lived there, raised his children there. And I think they're building a fence there in that picture. I believe that's what they're doing. Slate Mountain, right off the Blue Ridge Parkway near the Chateau Moret, is another one of his churches. And here he is later in life with some of the children. Bluemont up at the top of the Gap, almost inside of Shelby's house. He looks very studious there, doesn't he? Yeah. And of course, my favorite is he ends up in Mayberry. And Andy Griffith's mother is there on the right, Geneva Nun. She was from over here, I think near Kibble Valley. My joke is always, well, you know Andy Griffith's mother was a nun. Not a Catholic nun, but Kibble Valley. The thing you might not know, though, is if you go to Chapel Hill, and sorry, Wayne, I don't want anybody to ever go to Chapel Hill, but if you go to the library at Chapel Hill, Andy Griffith's papers are there. And if you go into his papers and look, he's got a copy of this book by Jerry Bledsoe about bicycling the Blue Ridge. And in there, Miss Addie, who used to run the Trading Post, tells Jerry Bledsoe, who also wrote Bitter Blood, a book that scared me to death. But he wrote this book, and in there he talks about how Miss Addie told him about Andy Griffith coming in as a little boy, I think with his grandfather, to trade with him at the Mayberry Trading Post. Now, folks, this is in Andy Griffith's papers at Chapel Hill, and he's got a big circle around this paragraph. Now, he doesn't say, no, this isn't true. He's got a big circle around this, like, yes, is how I took it. And it's in his papers. So I think, in my mind anyway, the town of Mayberry really does come from Mayberry, Virginia. And this picture, by the way, is 1957. It was Andy Griffith Day in Mount Airy. They had just come out with his movie, A Face in the Crowd, which is about as far away from Andy Taylor as one human being can get and still be on the planet. One of my favorite things to do is I used to go to the, excuse me, Mary, I used to go to the Trading Post and sign books in the fall. And I would go up and I'd sneak in the back bench and sit down and listen to Stuart Childress preach. And most of the time he caught me. He accused me of being a Baptist and sitting in the back row. And, but Stuart and I worked at Insteel together for years. He was the truck dispatcher until he got the call with me to preach. So I used to love to go and listen to Stuart preach. It was about as close as I was never going to get here. Bob Childress preached, because Stuart's big like his granddad. He didn't need a microphone. And of course, here's Dinwiddie. We went out Monday and went to all these churches. And the thing I think that impressed me is, you know, I'm in a modern car driving, and it ain't easy to get all these churches in a modern car. And there he was in that Model T or whatever he drove, a mule, a horse, and he's going all around servicing all these churches. And it's really quite amazing if you ever realize the distance involved in doing all that.
Tom, is he stuck?
I think he's stuck, Mary.
I see a chain there like
on
a
chain.
I think he's stuck. Or he's posing for a picture. This might
He's got a woman helping him, notice that?
Supervisor.